we are fortunate enough to be one of the few school districts in the state that doesn't have a supplemental.
Norm, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for coming today. You are the superintendent for Marsing School District, the one campus district, which I just found. You guys have like 800 kids?
830.
Okay.
I mean, you missed those 30 kids, so.
Yeah. Listen, when you're talking 800 to 830, you're talking almost 5% of the entire population.
Right.
That's an important piece. I'm really taken by Marsing for a couple reasons. One, when I drove out there recently, it was oppressively beautiful. I had no idea. And, you just cross the river and you're like, oh my God, like this place is wild, and I love finding those pockets. Super beautiful. But then when I got to the campus and talked to you, and then, also hearing about the success you guys have had with levies and the community opting to fund the schools, that to me is really impressive and telling of value of education. Talk to me about what the process was to get that levy passed. What is it needed for, and how does that fit into your story kind of as a district?
Well, as far as levies, we don't have a levy. We have a bond.
Oh my gosh. Bonds are for buildings.
Yes, bonds are for buildings.
Okay. The levies are for the teacher salaries. Okay, so it's not for salaries and whatnot. It's for facilities.
It's for facilities. So we were able to, back in 2017, we ended up, basically we had an old bond coming off. We did have a supplemental levy at that point. That was also expiring. And as both of those were coming off, we knew that we needed to take advantage of an opportunity to, if a bond and levies were coming off the books, here would be a good opportunity to try to, could we build something new to help enhance the education for our kids and increase the safety for our kids. Back at that point, we were shuttling kids back and forth 6 and 7 periods a day up across Main Street to our old gym. And there's all sorts of loss of instructional time there. And so looking at ways to improve the use of instructional time. We also had issues with, ultimately with security, because from our middle school, we had middle school kids transitioning all the way across our single campus to the high school for things such as special ed and for band and choir and advanced math classes. And so the security aspects of having them out in the open, walking clear across campus, that was a concern. There's also easy access to directly into our elementary playground from the main road. And so there was a number of things that were of concern. And so at that point, we had this great ad hoc committee come together, and they were tasked to really promote the bond and promote the need for the bond within our community.
And this was 2017?
That was 2017.
Gotcha.
And so that passed back then with a rate of over a 72% approval rating. And so along with that, then it allowed us to go ahead and basically that funded the building of a new middle school, new gymnasium, and all connected onto the 2 existing buildings, which was the cafeteria and the high school. So in essence, putting all kids under 6 through 12 under one roof. And to increase the security, it also put in security vestibules in the elementary school, as well as what was in the new construction in the secondary school. And it allowed us to not have to shuttle kids back and forth, and saving also on money for transportation going back and forth. And so this also allowed us to repurpose the old middle school and create that and transition that into our community school called the Hub, and really focused on trying to provide services through partnerships that would basically try to reduce the barriers that negatively impact our students and stop them from being successful overall. And so we are fortunate enough to be one of the few school districts in the state that doesn't have a supplemental. We are part of the CASA consortium, which is, it's 5 schools that came together 1969 to form a consortium and really trying to address professional technical education, career technical education, CTE, and then also they manage the alternative school, but they also manage the special ed for all 5 school districts. And so those levies are 10-year levies that help pay for CASA. So in regards to those, each of the 5 school districts, which would be Homedale, Parma, Notice, Wilder, and Marsing, we all have those CASA levies that allow for the additional help within funding to be able to provide that entity, and for us to be able to pay for our kids to receive education.
Gotcha. So MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com. So the collaboration between the 5 school districts, that's designed in essence to say, hey, I have this resource that's beneficial that we all kind of need, say like CTE programs or something like that. And instead of all of us reproducing the wheel, why don't we come together and kind of share the access to these things?
Correct. And that was established back in 1969, and it was at a different location, and over the years it has transitioned, and then they built the academy in Wilder a few years ago. I'm trying to remember, 15 to 20 years ago, and so we end up busing our students who are interested in taking career technical education, as far as CNA, culinary, diesel mechanics,
Sure.
and all of those. And so we bus our kids, but the whole purpose was to try to use a collaboration of funds coming together in a partnership in order to provide those educational opportunities for all of our kids. Right. And then some of our schools, we still house some of our own CTE staff. We have our own ag program, which is a very successful, very big program within Marsing, definitely considering our agricultural community. And then she also does welding within that class. And so that's what we can really look at as far as kids can get their certifications through CASA, such as their welding certification. And we have kids graduating from high school going out and making $50,000 right out of high school, which are really making more than some of their teachers that are instructing them. And then as far as we being able to offer our own at the same time to try to just provide more opportunities for kids.
That's one of the reasons. I was talking to a legislator just yesterday, the day before, and he was saying, hey, look, the reason that the West Ada School District is so large is because it actually merged with other districts in order to reduce the overall, at least one of the reasons was to reduce the overall administration fee. Like instead of having 2 superintendents that you pay a certain amount of money or 2 sets of whatever, if they merge, they would be able to actually reduce the overall expenses and then drive down the cost of education per student, because you have one superintendent spread over, say, 40,000 people instead of spread over 20. The difficulty, though, of having a large school district is obviously that you need to appeal to such a broad range of people, right? Like you have to get people in CUNA to agree with funding problems in Eagle as well as Star and, Meridian. You have different populations of, school-aged families versus, retired families who are not, they don't have the same sympathies and issues with for school education. So how does that work with your is it consortium? Consortium. You guys collaborate, so you get all the benefit of, hey, let's not individually reinvent the wheel, let's share our resources. So you get all of the benefit of that, but without any of the headache of we have to all unify together overall. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. As far as we do have each of our 5 school districts, we have one board member from our own school boards who serve as a board member on the CASA board. And so every school district has representation within the CASA board, and then that is how determinations are made. CASA has its own CEO, superintendent, whatever you want to call it. And so she's in charge of really overseeing the CASA building and the programs there. And then they have employees that go out and will work within our school districts as well. So even though they have their CTE programs there at CASA, and the alternative school that we bus our kids who need those services. There's special ed services that they provide to each of the school districts. CASA employs the special ed director, but they have their employees who work in our districts in the resource rooms, and
Gotcha.
so it's kind of an odd combination at some points, because you have
Bring this guy a little closer.
Sure.
You get comfy.
Yeah.
Just pull. You can pull the mic back. There you
Okay.
go. There you go.
So it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you have another group's employees working within your school district. So they work for you, but they work technically for CASA, and so it's one of those situations you've got to have a lot of collaboration back and forth and communication as you work through those.
Gotcha. Talk to me about the dynamics of providing public education in a small school in a very rural, agricultural-based community. This is particularly interesting to me because I was talking to somebody, both know, Luke, who was actually on recently, and he was talking to me about speaking with agricultural workers that, they themselves did not have a profound level of education. And they wanted a quality education for their kids, though. And the one conversation was really in particular, somebody was, anxious about some of the aspects of the education. Like, hey, I really don't like this for, like my 7-year-old. What are the different options? Okay. And there's, I think, a misconception about more rural areas that it's like, hey, you're not really utilizing, if you're going to be a farmer, you're not going to be utilizing the education. So, we don't really have to worry about it as much, which couldn't be farther from reality.
Right.
From all the farmers I've spoken with. I mean, when I had Brad McIntyre of McIntyre Pastures, man, have you ever had his food, by the way? Have you ever tried McIntyre
Yes.
protein?
Yeah.
Okay. I had, like, the first time I tried it, was like, okay, this is definitely a little different. And then I had like, my wife made one of their chickens and was like, this is the best chicken I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
Like, I don't even know. And just hearing him talk about the different ways they treat the animals, not just from a like, hey, happy little chicken, but from a, we let them go longer so they get more fat. And we do, all of these, like, this is, I'm never going back. Like, that's the only protein I'm ever eating in. God bless McIntyre Pastures. Anyway, but speaking with him, in our initial conversation, he's like, yeah, well, I came here when I got out of college and I was on the Marsing school board and everything. It's like, there we go. Like the misconception of the uneducated, just rural farmer who doesn't really care for education couldn't be farther from the truth when you have 70% of the population in Marsing electing to pay more to support the public school system. And then you have agricultural workers that, perhaps don't have the highest degree of education, really valuing the public school system and trying to be involved and engaged to make sure they get the best for their kids. So talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, education from the agricultural standpoint of things, it's incredibly important. It's everything in the agricultural field has so many ties into education overall. So whether that's the mathematics side of things or even into the chemistry side of things as chemicals are being mixed and understanding how much water should be applied to each of the crops. And there's so much of the scientific aspects of it that it's incredibly important. And our families, with Marsing being a very agriculturally based community, from the number of dairies that are there, we have the number of farms and ranches, as well as the vineyards and orchards, and all of those things are very agriculturally based. And having our families, and we have the Marsing Housing Authority just across the street from the high school, which also has the ag labor camp. So we have a lot of our families obviously working in the agricultural fields, and it is so important that their kids are receiving the appropriate education. And we do end up, there are situations at different times as we're trying to maneuver and try to provide the best possible services possible, especially when sometimes there's the language barrier. And so we try to make sure that as we are having meetings, that we're really being intentional about our materials that are being sent out are in multiple language, both English and Spanish, because Spanish is the major other language that's within our area. And then making sure that we have translators that are there for our meetings. So whether that's parent-teacher conferences, so that families feel comfortable being able to communicate with their teachers, be able to communicate with the administrators. And then we also have those same systems set up for when we have our community meetings. As we've done community activities and events around our community school efforts and our wellness efforts, really focusing on mental health. We've had a number of community meetings, and we always try to make sure that we have a good group of translators that are there that can help with that communication, so that we are being able to also listen and gather feedback from everyone. And because it takes everyone within the school system and everyone within the community to really provide the education for our kids. And it's so critical that we're trying to meet the needs of all the students. And so that's so key to the things that we're trying to do, especially as we've involved our community school. So not only we're trying to provide the basic education that we have, but then also trying to look at ways that we can provide for our students and their families to help reduce those barriers that may interfere with kids being successful, and trying to make sure that we're listening to families, meeting them where they are, and trying to provide those services and help the students be successful, and then carry them on to whatever the next steps are for them. So whether that's going directly into a career field, or whether that's pursuing and going on to post-secondary education, and trying to make sure that we have our migrant family liaison available for the families, our student liaison available for students, and helping them venture out and helping them with scholarships. And we have a Gear Up coordinator who's also trying to expose all of our students to college opportunities that are out there that they may not even know of. And so trying to provide as many opportunities, and it really does come down to prioritizing education overall.
Right. There's I think a great myth that people, especially in the agricultural world, view education as solely an escape from the agricultural world, which I was first introduced to this. I was working with the Wente wine, doesn't matter. It's a wine guy. And his daughter, who I was working with to help her get into college, she wanted to just work the family, I don't know, it was like an Appalachian. I don't know what they had a lot of land, a lot of grapes. And she wanted to be into that, but the parents very much wanted her to go to college, and she was going to go study viticulture and, some other things. There's a pragmatism to education that exists in an agricultural world that, just walking around in the professional world, like you walk around Eagle, it's like, okay, so like, what are you going to go to college for? I have plenty of friends that question, okay, you want to go to college, kid? That's fine. Like, I went to college. That's fine. What are you going to do? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out like once I get educated. And that's fine. There are plenty of people that go and they want to pursue education as a moral pursuit and to improve themselves and understand the world. That's totally fine. But there seems to be a real pragmatic answer for a lot of agricultural families, which is like, no, I'm going to college to study this so I can come back here and do this. It's not the kind of thing where people say like, well, I worked so hard on the farm, you have to get educated so you never come back here. I don't see that actually playing out in reality. I know it's a very popular sentiment, especially in media or movies like,
right.
What was that movie? Honorable Men, Cuba Gooding Jr., right? When he was like the deep sea diver guy,
right,
and he was working the field with his dad, and his dad's like, you got to get out of here because his hands are all blistered.
Right.
It was a different kind of experience he was having. But
yeah, a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit different. But am I accurate in that? Do you see that reflected in your families as well?
Well, I think definitely so. As far as, because there is, especially with some of our families that I mean, it is their livelihood, and so for our kids to be able to go out and get some worldly experience, but then also go out, get their education, how it directly pertains to coming back and making sure that business is continuing to be successful and providing for the families as it has for, and sometimes generations. And so it is important for them to be very, very purposeful as they're going out and getting their education. Not to say that there aren't the families that, okay,
Go figure it out.
Go figure it out. But
God, sociology majors, every single one of them. I can't do it. Like the sociology man, like, what are you doing? And it's like tens of thousands of dollars a year. It drives me crazy.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Those general studies degrees, those.
Yeah, like here's the problem for me. I went into Cal as a math major, and then I switched to rhetoric because I fell in love with writing and communication. So like, surprise, I like communicating, and I really, really loved writing. I thought it was really important to me, and I also enjoyed philosophy and studying and arguing. I love arguing with people, and And so for me, that was really valuable. And it turned out later on, it wasn't, the value of that education was not well communicated, because I really felt it was valuable. The instructors obviously felt it was valuable, but try explaining a rhetoric degree to your dad. He's like, what are you doing? It's like, this is a total waste. But what it comes down to is that you, at least for me, and again, this was not like a terminal engineering degree or something, I learned how to at least start putting together my ability to describe the world and the problems I experience in it, and the like, just being able to manipulate that and express your vision of the world or what you're experiencing in the world to other people. That's great. Like at the core of every argument you've ever heard two people have, it's like, you're not hearing me or you're not listening to me. Yeah. It's like, okay, so like, what if we could help that? what if, and you don't have to be like, in a relationship with somebody, but being able to articulate yourself appropriately. Again, I don't want to poo-poo all over the humanities. Like, they're valuable. Sociology drives me nuts.
They are important, and it helps provide a well-rounded education. And you're right. It gives kids the opportunity to explore life, to see other perspectives, because especially when you're in a small community and sometimes you are restricted to the beliefs of that community or of that family, and then to be able to go out and experience a little bit of the world and to see that there are other perspectives, and then to give them the opportunity to form their own ideas and beliefs. And then at that point, if they're coming back, being able to still be able to have those arguments, so to speak, and be able to justify those beliefs is very important, and especially as you are defending, as far as you're defending why you're raising a crop or whatever it would be. There's always purposes of the things that you're learning in those post-secondary experiences to be able to bring those back. I mean, I have a general studies degree. That's where I got my BS in. And I'm one of those that I'm a first generation college student from my family. It took me a long time. I should have been a doctor for the amount of time I was in.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Eastern Oregon University, and small little school, but I also attended a community college that's where I started. Went to the 4-year institution. Was asked to leave the 4-year institution, and then went back to the community college, got serious about my studies, and then came through. So I am definitely one that can understand sometimes the struggles of some of the students and what they're experiencing within life, and how you can overcome those things and then in turn be successful after that. And so being able to experience life and understand that there are ways that you bounce back and move forward.
Yeah, somebody told me a long time ago, they're like, one of the best things about the United States is it gives you opportunities to fail flat on your face over and over and over. And then the second you want to get back up, they're like, oh yeah, we can help you with that. Like, here you go. Here's this program. And obviously the old adage that education is wasted on the young, right?
Right.
I have several family members that have massive advanced degrees that all started at JCs, and some of them very poorly at JCs. I think my dad, who's a physician, did 4 years at his JC. He went to Vietnam, barely graduated high school, went to Vietnam, came back, and then slogged through 4 years and tried to get into a 4-year after the first 2 years. And they were like, yeah, no, not yet, son. And it's like, he went back another 2 years and then got in and then went on to med school. And one of my siblings as well flunked out of high school and then did, JC right out of the blocks for a year or two, got trash grades, and then came back to it 4 years later, really with the intent of educating himself. And then he crushed, and he has a PhD. He's a jerk, but he's good. He's very educated. I don't know. I don't enjoy it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But again, I feel you on the value of, or questioning the value of it in general, because, I actually struggled my first year and a half of 4-year, and I went straight to a 4-year, and it was a bloodbath. Like, it was terrible. I went to one of the worst schools in California, worse than the worst school in Compton, believe it or not. Like the graduation rate, college readiness rate of my high school for the highest socioeconomic class, which I was not part of because I'm Mexican, but for like the Caucasian conglomerate at the school was like 8% college readiness rating from the highest, most educated portion of the population. So it's not a great school, right? So I get to Cal and I just get destroyed. But again, it gave me time to figure out and orient myself towards like, okay, but this is going to be the value, right? Like you haven't really done well because the value hasn't really been explained to you, right? Or you haven't realized it, right? Is that something that you have to struggle with at all in your community more than you think with a more suburban community, explaining the value of the education? Or do you think that it's, people just see education as valuable as anywhere else?
Well, I think that within our normal school setting, I think that families do see the value of education, and I think that COVID has also played a part in where we are now. That even though that there is a value within education, we also spent time during those COVID years of don't worry about coming to school if if you have a sniffly nose, and so people holding out and not going to school as on a regular basis or taking vacations, and
Right.
and so trying to get families as far as understanding and continuing to understand that the importance of education and being there on a day-to-day basis. But I think that there is definitely an understanding that education is important. Our families want their kids to be educated. They want their kids to get the high school diploma. I think as you're going through and going to that next step, I think you see some of our kids who could go on, who are choosing not to go on for whatever reason. And some of that is just wanting to go straight into the workforce. And so it really comes down to sometimes our go on rates are not real high. So you may start off real strong, and then once they get out there and realize that it's a little bit more of a challenge, then they come home and go right into the workforce.
Gotcha.
And trying to help our students to go ahead and continue to go on and also see success is incredibly important as well.
And again, go on to what end?
Right.
Right. Like the problem that I think I experienced, which I really disliked, was, okay, but what's the alternative? Like growing up in Concord, like you don't go on to, you don't, just like you're working at Blimpies, and like nothing against Blimpies, they have great bread.
Right.
Like just like it's fine.
Right.
Nothing against people who work there, but it was a frustrating endeavor because the community was trying to become this, was attempting to push graduation rates towards college matriculation so hard that there weren't even other alternatives that would have made sense to me at the time. Now, I'm very happy that I went on and got educated. That's fine. But, one of the things I love about the Idaho education system so much is that there is this emphasis of like, look, man, you don't got to go to college. Like
Right.
we're here to help you, so you make $50,000 the day you leave here. Like that's fine. And like, by the way, $50,000 is a good amount of money, maybe more than a starting teacher. I don't know the salaries, but that's a valuable
It is.
thing. There it is. So like, here's this 18-year-old theoretically making more than his English teacher.
Right.
Right. And by the way, that's not a scam. We'll help you do that. And
Right.
you're going to carry that skill set with you forever. Now, if you want to go to college, great. And to the degree that we can improve the odds of somebody going to a great college instead of like a mediocre college to get more out of their money, great. Let's push towards that. But just saying like, yeah, look, we're surrounded by people making money, by businesses operating, by like real hands-on things. You don't have to go to college. You can just work there. Right? Like that guy on the thing with the wrench, like you can be that guy who's going to go and, I don't know farm terminology, but he's going to work the land somehow.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I just appreciate that. I admire so much of the honesty that more agricultural communities have with each other around education, which is education for education's sake is not a valuable end. That's like, yeah, we want you to be educated to the degree that it can improve your life. But that doesn't mean you go into like massive debt and you think it's the only thing you can do. Like you're surrounded by viable options.
Right. And I think one of the challenges that we've faced, especially as we've talked about the CASA consortium,
Sure.
As far as having our kids take advantage of those options that are there. We are in a position in Marsing where we are very fortunate. We have a incredible staff. Some of those staff members at the high school level have been there for many, many years. And so they have endorsements that allow them to teach a large number of dual credit classes, meaning that they get high school credit, but they also get college credit. And so we offer, I think, 60 dual credit for college credits that students can get. And our high school is extremely proud of that. And we're all extremely proud of that. The situation that comes along with that as well is that not every student who's taking those classes are going to go on to post-secondary opportunities. And so it's the dilemma of wanting to provide opportunities for kids that can also save parents money because they get those credits now, and they don't have to pay college level dollar amounts for them. So there's the dilemma of pushing kids to take advantage of those opportunities or redirecting them and knowing that more than likely little Johnny is not going to, his family is not going to want him to go on to college. But could we set him up for an opportunity to be very successful in the trades and to be able to redirect him into one of the CASA programs and to really push that so that that student could be ready for the job fair or job field soon as he graduates from high school. Same thing for, whether it's CNA, pharmacy, all of these certified opportunities. Why not push our kids to be able to go in that direction if they're not going to be taking advantage of those post-secondary opportunities at a college level? Why not help them be successful no matter which direction they're going to go? And so we've had this dilemma of not very many kids taking advantage of an opportunity that is there for them. And we've been pushing take those dual credit classes. Here's an opportunity to, okay, let's regroup and have those conversations. And we've spent this last year even trying to make a determination whether we wanted to stay in CASA or not. And was it economically still reasonable for us to be in it? And in the end, we decided that yes. And so along with that comes with changing the format of how we're really addressing and talking to our kids about the opportunities and really trying to lay out the full perspective for them. And especially with our agriculturally based community, here's an opportunity for kids to walk out of their high school with a welding certification and then be out on the farm and doing certified welding or diesel mechanics, all of these different things that are definitely trade specific right into the workforce.
And it's such a difficult balance, right? Because you want to offer somebody with I really liked math. Okay. And I went through calculus in high school and I had to jump I remember even in sixth grade, got put in sixth grade math, and I knew that I had to hit algebra by eighth grade in order to get to geometry by freshman year, to get to calculus by senior year. Right. And I knew this in sixth grade. So I had to jump from sixth grade math to eighth grade math, pass pre-algebra to algebra, and then make sure I do well enough that I got into geometry. So I wanted to have that opportunity to go all the way up to calculus and go through calculus and have the opportunity to take the AP test, things like that. I didn't ultimately end up studying math though. I'd studied for a little while and then I switched to something else. But what is the purpose of education then? If we're just saying, hey, look, you only get to study what's going to be meaningful in the end. Because first, we don't even know.
Right.
And again, you could say, look, man, high probability that kid's not going to college. We should push him into something that's going to make him money at 18. And not AP Lit.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's an argument there for that. But by the same token,
but it's a dilemma.
It's a dilemma. First off, maybe he's not going to college tomorrow.
Right.
How do you know it's not later? What if he tries to go to a 4-year university at 21 and the dual credit courses save him a full semester of tuition, which pans out to be $12,000
right.
or something like that. Right. We don't know. And limiting through functionality or limiting through immediate value. So I'm going to limit your education because it's not going to have immediate value for you. That's a dilemma. That's a tough one, right?
And it really is, because you're talking about kids here making determinations on what it's going to look like for them years down the road. How many times do college kids change their major?
Right.
And these are kids and they're still kids that are older than these kids that we're also making determinations for. And so it is a true dilemma, and we're still trying to balance how that's looking. So our strategy right now is really trying to make sure that everyone is well acquainted with here's all the offerings that we have.
Right. Here are your options.
Yes.
Like you pick whichever donut you want.
Yes.
We got a lot of them. This one might, it's taking a little bit longer, but yeah.
And know that depending on which one you take, you may in the end make more, but this one you could go right off directly out of high school and you could be making a lot more than these kids who are having college debt. Right. And so it's that whole dilemma back and forth, and I do not have an answer for that.
Right.
But it's something that it is just about laying out the options and trying to provide the best possible opportunities for them and their families to make a decision that would be best for them.
Right. I'm still just so. We did pass a levy in West Ada recently. Okay. And great.
Yeah.
Passed the levy. But the vitriol and hatred towards the public education system, or towards the budget for the public education system, it was really disheartening to me. Now, again, I'm not saying write a blank check at all, but right. West Ada clocks in at like $5,000 or $6,000 per student, which is like 50% under the state average, and like significantly, I think like by hundreds of percent underneath the national average. And we get a really good result. And just to see people getting so frustrated about it, especially when you're coming from a largely educated, or, I have to imagine the Eagle Meridian area has a fair concentration of, college graduates or people that went on to education after high school, whatever it might be. And it's like, how is it that this community gets so worked up in a bunch about funding education? And here's Marsing in the middle of these cornfields where like 70% of the people are like, yeah, let's make sure we get them what they need. Like I'm so taken by that.
Well, I think as far as even going back to the bond, for example,
sure.
I mean, I think it really comes down to the people that you have there who are your supporters. Mm-hmm. And there are some real key, especially in a small community, there are some key people that, they have connections, and then their connections have connections. And so if you have this critical mass, so to speak, that you get together and they're all in favor of something, that basically creates this momentum that keeps moving forward. And I think that, it started with the bond, and we've continued to move forward and do positive things, which has allowed us to transition and create the community school and continue to work on things such as the wellness and
right.
and so everything that we are working on, it's because of that critical mass and trying to develop supporters and trying to make sure you're providing those services to the families and trying to make sure that students are as successful as we can possibly make them.
Do you think part of it is that because Marsing is so small, you have a meaningful connection to the community? Like, you don't even have 1,000 students, and you, Norm, are very engaged in the community and and the education. And do you think it's that it's harder for people to get lost in the spin on things when you're kind of like, hey, if you would like to see our dirt track, you're welcome to come over and see our dirt track.
Right.
And by the way, this is Johnny, and Johnny now has a track scholarship to go to college running on this dirt track. And we're not even asking you to help us get something other than a dirt track. We're saying we actually really need to fix that leak, right? Yeah. Like, it's the capacity to meaningfully integrate the community into the struggle, where it's like, look, these are our problems. We're putting kids on a bus. Like, this is little Johnny going on the bus to the gym in the middle of the day. We're losing 25 minutes of instructional time every single day. That's 5 days a week. Most people got that 125 minutes of instructional time, normally 2 hours, and times 40 weeks or something. So we lost 80 hours of instruction time, right? That's 2 full-time jobs, right? Or 2 weeks of full-time work. Like, that's a lot of work that you lose. And again, I don't know the conversations you've had, obviously, but do you think it's that intimacy, that close-knit kind of what you're saying, which is to get to the people who have the greatest sway or people listen to, hitting that critical mass, you can stay connected with those people. You can stay connected with the community because you are so tight-knit.
And I think that that's the benefit of being in a small community. And my whole career has been focused in small communities. And I really just love that connection that you have, the way that you get to know families, the way that you get to know the students. And so trying to be as transparent as possible. Somebody wants to have a conversation, come on in, let's have the conversation. And laying everything out for them to see that, okay, here's what we have, here's what we need. And then having people feel very comfortable. And in a small community, I mean, the schools are the central point. It's where they come on the weekends, whether they have kids or not. They're coming to athletic events and spending time. And so people see the school as a key hub, let alone the hub of our community school, but just the district itself. And it's where people gather. And so when you have that, and you have people working together, and you have those key individuals within the community that have credibility, street cred, so to speak, that as they see things, and if they have questions, then they're being supportive of whatever it is, X, Y, or Z, then it's more likely that other people will also be supportive, because I know this person, and if they believe in it, well, I think I should probably believe in it too. And so that has definitely helped as far as with the establishment of what we've done, with how we continue to develop and grow. And there's always going to be those things. You're just waiting to the next thing to come up, and somebody gets unhappy with something, and you've got to deal with that. And
right.
But
the tight knit community is a double-edged sword.
Right. And in a small community, I think that you also have families and individuals who feel they should have more of a say. If you're in West Ada and there's 40,000 kids in West Ada, your complaint is not going to go up the chain as high as it would in Marsing. If you have a complaint, it may very well end up on my desk very quickly. And where to make it to Derek Bubb at West Ada, it may never make it there.
Right.
And so it's just a different beast, so to speak. But it's so fulfilling to be in that smaller setting, to know the individuals, to know the kids, know the families, and then to be able to try to address and to be able to meet the needs of the highest need families.
Right. And whatever that means, obviously.
Right.
Highest need academic achieving, highest need maybe special ed, highest need with, welding or career tech, like get people as far across the finish line in whatever chosen race they want to run.
Right.
Man, that's good stuff, Norm. God bless you, sir. Listen.
Well, it's all of us working together, and that's the key, is that it's not just one or two people. It's our instructional staff doing what they can in the classroom. It's the building administrators making sure, trying to do their part. Our coordinators, as far as the hub, everyone working together, in the community and the families, and that's the critical junction. Is if you're not communicating, if you're not working together, nothing's going to get accomplished. But coming together and everyone trying to move for the betterment of the kids. We want to make decisions on what's best for kids, not what makes adult lives easier, and to focus on the kids.
Man, I love that you said that last piece. That I think there was so much disillusionment over, for instance, the COVID years, with educators and administrators, not here, but educators and administrators that I interacted with in my previous state, that were interested in the adults. They were not interested in the kids. And even in the face of overwhelming evidence that children were, as dark as it is, getting suicidal and really struggling, they're like, well, but the English teacher lives with her mom. Like, we can't ask her to come back. It's like, I don't know what you mean. I would ask her to come back right now. Like, this is a 16-year-old who's losing her damn mind.
Right.
And man, I just appreciate that. You got to be in it for the kids, like, meaningfully. Yeah.
Without question. I mean, that's the reason, or it should be the reason why we all went into education.
Yeah. One last question.
Sure.
I have to imagine Marsing is not the recipient of a lot of people coming from out of state, as far as like new residents. Perhaps some, but not many, right? Or not as concentrated as, say, the city of Eagle. Do you think that is a benefit or a hindrance? And let me be very specific. And I am guilty of this, so please understand I'm pointing at myself. When I moved here, right before I moved here, when we decided we were going to move, my wife and I sat down and was like, okay, what are the private schools we're going to go to? Because we had such a bad taste in our mouth about the public schools in California. And we were right about having a bad taste in our mouth for those schools, wrong about it for this. And we thankfully got educated about the school districts and what the teachers and the education system was like. And we made the decision like, okay, let's do public ed. Couldn't be happier, right? Yeah, there are problems, but like the problems get taken care of, very functional, reasonable people, no sweat. I also think there are a lot of people that don't get that benefit of having somebody saying, hey, we've gone through this, as we did. We've gone through this for a couple of years now. The school is actually really, really strong. You don't need to go immediately. Some people I think are more persuaded by national news about culture wars and the schools essentially being the battleground for those wars to be won and lost. And that's not to say everybody that goes private is doing that, but I know some people do.
Right.
Do you think that you're being somewhat insulated by that, which allows you to function in largely the manner you've been functioning since there was a large wave of transplants from other states?
And I don't know that. We don't get a lot of people coming in from outside, such as California, or just because of the limitations within housing within the Marston community overall. There are subdivisions that are going in, but some of the price tags on some of those are ones that some of our families couldn't necessarily afford. But that's where those outside state people are coming in to buy some of those. But as far as for us, it's really just been us continuing to do the things that we have always done. So even through COVID, the only time that we were closed when we were forced to close that one quarter, and from when it first released. From other standpoints, we were in session. We were social distancing when possible, but you've got 65, 70 kids on a school bus. And we're still providing face-to-face education. We're not in masks. We're doing the things that we need to do. And because that was the belief system and the values of the Marston community. And so we've held to those values and those things that are important. And that's what we continue to hold to in order to provide the best rounded education we can. So I think sticking to the basics and the fundamentals of what is true to the Marston community and that belief system is what has helped us continue to move forward with what we're doing.
Man, that's awesome. Norm, listen to me. I know you got things to do today. Thank you for coming in. Is there anything you'd like to say here at closing?
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and having me on your show. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in. And again, I'm really impressed with Marston. It's super cool. And it's very refreshing to see a community that is more agricultural based, still valuing education so openly, even if that means it costs them more money. It's like, God bless it, man. And you guys are obviously doing a good job with it. So
we're very fortunate.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Norm.
Thank you.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.